Anyway, listen, you might have heard this story in the press today. We all know about the migrant crisis, everyone trying to cross the channel in record numbers. We also know that it leads to some very sad deaths. UK has got the blame. President Macron is basically saying that the UK bears responsibility for each and every migrant that drowns in the Channel, and has gone on to accuse politicians in Westminster of hypocrisy. Jo Phillips, your thoughts on this?
Well, the only people who are to blame for the terrible, terrible, tragic deaths of people in the Channel are the appalling people smugglers, the criminals who let them set out to sea in completely unseaworthy vessels, overcrowded with no life jackets. They're the sort of things that you wouldn't even put kids out on a summer's day on a flat, calm sea. Those are the people who are solely responsible. Frankly, President Macron, he's fighting for re-election. France has fallen out of love with him. He's trying to look tough, but I would think the reality is that most people in France don't really care very much about Britain. This is just a spat. It's exactly the same as we've got going on in Ukraine. It's a little bit of sabre rattling and machismo around the sort of European. But the real tragedy is people who are fleeing appalling conditions, like the people who are dying in Afghanistan, who are selling their children and their kidneys and living on dry flour, who are facing the most diabolical winter. Those are people who are desperate, who then end up in the hands of the criminal smugglers. And we all, every country, needs to work together to get them out of the system.
James?
Well, it's all very well to join Boris and everybody else on the people smugglers, but I thought the EU policy in the Mediterranean, as elsewhere, is, let them die. And the fact is that France in particular, actually, the elite in France, not everybody, has had a discreditable record in relation to immigration and towards race. In 1961, it may not be Macron, but you've got to reckon with this stuff. They killed perhaps 200 Algerians by throwing them into the Seine and beating them to death because of the Algerian War of Independence. We don't need, I'm no nationalist, we don't need a lesson from Monsieur Macron about race and any of that stuff. He's got a disastrous racial situation developing in France, much worse than ours. And you only have to look at the Islamic attacks there, which are much worse than ours, to see how dangerous it's becoming. He has no right to lecture this country, with all our defects, on the question of race, immigration, and us being uniquely responsible. Fantastic. The Anglo-Saxon model that he's always railing against. I think Joe's quite right. Most French don't buy that about the British. They don't think they're all terrible and appalling anti-immigrant and so on. They're looking elsewhere, and Macron, maybe with any luck, he'll be ousted in the next election, even though his successors maybe will be. Nothing to write home about.
Daniel?
Well, I think Joe put it absolutely right about the responsibility of the people smugglers, and I couldn't agree more with what he said about that. Well, one of the interesting things about this, though, and Joe hinted at it, is there's this idea that Macron is doing this because he's up for re-election, as if the French were really going to vote for him because he was rude about Britain all the time. And I really doubt that, because, as Joe said, I don't think the French are going to vote for him because he's rude about Britain, because I don't think they care. I'm beginning to worry that actually he really believes all this stuff about Britain. He really does hate Britain. And when he gets re-elected, if he gets re-elected, he'll carry on like this. I think the idea that there's a wonderful period of Anglo-French friendship that's going to be available, come May, is a complete fantasy. He'll carry on trying to destroy relations with Britain and then blaming us for it.
How's he going to handle the defence relationship, which is much stronger than everything else?
Well, we're going to find out what defence relationship exists, I think, over the next few weeks, quite possibly. As troops are deployed now, British troops, now American troops, we heard on the news today, more American troops being deployed. Where are we going to see what France is doing, how well integrated they are? Are they working with their allies, or are they having their own little thing going on in the corner, as they so often do? We'll find out what the defence relationship is. Britain is up for a defence relationship, and Britain's up for a really good relationship with France on trade and other issues. But all you get is your fingers snapped off the whole time by Macron.
There's one thing I think perhaps could be added, which is, does anybody really know what the British government's policy on immigration and those boats is?
Well,
and if I may just conclude, Joe, there was an earlier item which I was really struck by. I thought it was fantastic news, which is the proposal, unless I'm wrong, to educate children, primary school children, I think it is, to know 6 recipes before they leave school. I want to know the government's firm but fair 6 recipes for immigration control. And, you know, we need a little more precision than we're getting in the white paper on levelling up. I have no idea what their policy is. That can only embolden the people smugglers to the extent that they're the problem. And I think, you know, we have to have a policy not of banning immigration, not of allowing unlimited immigration, but around 6 recipes, please.
Well, there you go. That's James's call there, his plea. What are your 6 recipes for migration? If anyone from the government is listening, watching, and you have your 6 recipes to hand, get in touch and let me know.
Whatever gets a headline.
Well, yeah, there you go. You know our thoughts on the panel. Let me know yours. Lots of you emailing in.